Well, hello there and welcome to the latest edition of the About Small Business podcast. I'm really excited today to be chatting to Jo Long of Jo Long Consulting. Jo is actually a strategic marketing consultant, and she is going to be chatting to us today about her journey in business. Jo, thank you so much for joining me.
It's a pleasure, Barry. Thanks for having me.
So, when I was chatting to you earlier, I mentioned you're a marketing consultant. You were very quick to stipulate that you're a strategic marketing consultant.
Yeah.
Now, for anyone that's not in that area, they may appreciate an explanation.
Absolutely.
So
it's
if
a
you're
very
able
confusing world, I think.
I think it certainly is.
Yeah, well, just generally, but yeah, marketing especially. So marketing is such a broad area that there's lots of people involved in marketing in lots of different ways. So
Yes.
it could be communication, it could be PR, it could be sales. I always considered sales and marketing very, very tough.
That is interesting, isn't it? It's like sort of the very, very different roles from what I've experienced myself. I used to work in telesales.
Oh, okay. But then even from a telesales point of view, you have to have some marketing content or some information that you can then use, and also maybe some branding or some internal PR that you would use then to help
I
communicate.
think people tend to find the term marketing a bit less scary.
Yes.
If I say I'm in sales, everyone's like, what? No, they're
Yes.
clutching the wallets.
Yeah.
Marketing, it's not, sort of just a little bit,
softer, I think, isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah. So the strategy side comes from really being quite top line. So all those things I've mentioned, like communication, PR, perhaps, or even digital marketing, they're quite tactical. And so what you need, in my opinion, is to have a big plan before you can start doing it, putting those tactics in place. So, and that's where the strategy comes from. So you're kind of like looking where you are now, where you want to be, and how you're going to get there. So that's your strategy. And then what tactics are going to use to actually build that strategy and make sure you go in the right direction, basically.
Right, okay. So, I mean, looking at your career previously, how have if you take us back to, I don't know, like sort of at school, what were your aptitudes when you were at school? Were you like an English person? Were you writing copy, that kind of thing? Are you maths as well? Because, I mean, from what you're describing, what's interesting, and I think once you start to look at, as you've said, the broader picture with marketing, it's easy to see how a mathematical brain and a communicative English brain, English is in the subject rather than the people, could easily find a role.
Yeah, definitely.
So
I think it's a really good mix. I mean, at school I was a fairly average student, to be honest. You know, I had lots of, the non-stop report of she's got plenty of potential. She just needs to apply herself. You know, it's that.
I think teachers just wrote that because they couldn't think of anything else.
Anyway. But yeah, I've always loved English. I've always loved reading. I've always loved writing. I've only just started writing for myself. So I started doing some creative writing for myself about 18 months, 2 years ago, which has been amazing, actually. But
all right.
I want to talk about that maybe later. But from a schooling point of view, I was a fairly average midstream student, really. So I loved English. I also really enjoyed maths. I can't say I excelled at either of them particularly, but I definitely wanted to go on and do English at a later time.
But you enjoyed school.
But I was very lucky. I've had a very privileged life, really. My dad was in the military, and so we moved kind of around the world as well as around the country with that, and which was amazing. But also it meant from when I was younger, it was really hard because we moved maybe every 2 years, and every 2 years I had to make new friends. And it comes to a point where it's quite exhausting spending probably the first 3 or 4 months of a new school trying to make new friends. So I can
see that. However, from what you do, I can also see little building blocks that are giving you the skills that you are then going to be able to use at this stage in your career.
I do think that's exactly what happened. And then my dad was posted to Australia, and we had a few years in Australia, which was wonderful. And then when we came back, I left my best friend on the other side of the world, and I was distraught about it. I know. And I was only 7 or 8, so it was quite a difficult time, really, in some ways, in the very small bubble of my world at that point. So I actually chose to go to private school and go away to school because I didn't want to have to make friends all the time. So that also brings with it some elements of having to be very social, having to fit in, having to work out how you fit into a kind of like a team then, how you fit into the school and all that kind of stuff. So I've had a very lucky life because my education was exceptional, and I had lots of opportunities to try lots of different things, which was amazing. And it also meant I had the quality of my teaching was really good at that point. I was just very lucky, really. So
but you've had a good start there, certainly, and you can see those sort of building blocks to what you eventually develop
Yeah, I think
into your
so,
adult
yeah.
life. I mean, did you progress with your academic studies?
Yes, I went to uni. I
You must have been slightly above average then if you're going to uni, is
Well,
that
yes, I
fair?
suppose probably slightly. Well, probably not for my school though.
I was
And,
going to say,
you know, it's
just
different
a pure point of interest.
caliber of student at a private education school generally.
Yeah, because I suppose there's generally speaking there are going to be, I don't know, I've not got the statistics to hand, but I would imagine that from private schools there would be that broader encouragement to get to university,
Yes,
as if you'd been to
absolutely.
state school.
Yeah, totally. And also, you know, I know it's definitely more ingrained in general schooling now for performance and numbers and where you are on league tables and things like that. But for our school, it was really important to stay in the top 10 of the Telegraph, you know,
Yeah.
top schools of the UK or whatever it was, you know, all that kind of stuff. So they wanted students to perform. We were very lucky, and the school was very lucky. They had a lot of overseas students that came in.
Yeah.
So which brought them another very, very high intelligence level as well. So, you know, we were surrounded by people who were very well educated, and the staff were very well educated and very experienced in their teaching as well. So from my point of view, it was an amazing experience. Having said that, you know, and I was predicted excellent A-level grades, and then after my mocks I decided I probably didn't have to do any more work. So when the exams actually came round, I hadn't kept up with those studies. So I think my dad cried before I did when I picked my results up. So I had this whole experience then of having to go through clearing. At that point, it was really kind of thought down upon to go through clearing, because it was a bit like, oh my goodness, you've really messed up your A-levels.
If you're enjoying this content, please do like and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit the notification bell to let you know exactly when another podcast's going to drop.
And
again, that is really interesting. That is
now.
really interesting because, like, sort of from a state school perspective, yes, but you were still going on. You were still getting in, and it's just, I suppose, just interesting, I suppose, comparing those different.
Yeah, totally. And I don't think it's got
perspectives.
that kind of label anymore that it's a bad thing to go through clearing. Because I think
No.
a lot of students now go to clearing to see what else is about for them.
I think
It's like
one
a shopping
issue.
experience.
Yeah,
for
I think
uni.
one issue is like sort of, or certainly where I think it was my generation, and I'm going to caveat this by saying of state school because I didn't know anyone until I actually got to university who went to a fee-paying school and
Okay,
description.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
But certainly for the likes of me and my peers, it was just getting to university, and there wasn't very much direction.
Okay.
It was just kind of like
As in from the school or just
just generally. I think, you know, sort of,
Yeah.
it's like, well, why are you going to university? Well, because I'll get a good job, and you just kind of following this narrative.
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly, especially when my pathway to uni wasn't quite as it should have been, perhaps, let's put it that way. And my dad said to me, you know, you've got a few choices. Basically, you can go to the military like I did,
Yeah.
which I'm definitely a lover, not a fighter. So I was a bit like, oh, I don't know if the military is really for me. You can go into a management scheme, maybe like through M&S or something like that.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure about that because I didn't know if I definitely wanted to go into something like that anyway. Or you find yourself a place at uni and you find a good degree that you know that will take you on somewhere else. It's
Yeah.
you're not just a flake about at uni kind of thing. And I was really lucky. So I ended up doing, well, I don't know if it's a good degree or not really, but it was called business decision analysis, which sounds really niche and quite awkward.
It sounds quite fancy.
I did a lot of stats, which really wasn't my bag at all. But, you know, but I also did lots of French and lots of business stuff, actually.
Right.
So it actually led to me thinking perhaps there is a way into business doing something like this. And I wasn't so much dedicated to marketing particularly, but I'd always known from school that I liked that kind of environment.
Yeah.
So the kind of shopping and what makes people buy, and like quite inquisitive about that type of thing. So yeah, so I ended up going to uni, and then when I left uni with my degree, again a fairly average mark of degree, but I got one, so that's nice. And then I worked in a very small insurance company for a very short while actually, and learned more about how to handle bailiffs than anything else.
Right.
Which was quite an interesting.
I think most jobs, most jobs, they're nothing like you kind of expect, are they?
No,
whatever it might
was
be.
Really interesting, and I mean it was great because, you know, I just left uni, so I was probably still I was partying way too hard. Probably not. And knowing my career wasn't
what? I'm pleased you
insurance,
said that, because I wasn't sure if that was an appropriate question in terms of like how hard, just if there was because I do remember when I was at university meeting a number of people from, the fee-paying sectors, and, they could party just as hard as anyone.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It was like, I mean, for me, it was like almost home from home in some ways, because I've been away from school since I was like maybe 9 or 10 years old. So I didn't really live at home, so therefore I was comfortable being away from home. And that's not to say that my home life wasn't good. It was lovely going home and everything else, but I was very confident being away from home.
That was interesting. That is interesting, because I do recall the kids that had come from that kind of background, they just seemed that bit more sure of themselves.
Absolutely.
And when it came to things like the ball, the balls,
yes,
I'd just caveat that again, saying that by balls I mean the dances.
yes.
That could be easily misinterpreted, but it's. I'd never worn a tuxedo before, never worn a dinner jacket,
wow.
and I turned up in a suit thinking, well, this'll do, and then there's all these other kids in the black ties, and and me, and there's one of my mates from Sheffield who well, they're in a suit, so what about it? What's your problem?
Exactly.
So we're here for one reason only, dressed up like a bloody penguin, but it's. But it was that thing, and I do remember, there were one or two snide marks, snide remarks about it. No one really cared, but it's just the difference and I think the culture shock.
Yeah,
frankly.
Yeah, very much. I mean, even when I first started uni and moved into halls, and there were people crying, and I was kind of like, what are they crying about? You've moved out of home. This is fabulous. You don't even understand the freedom you've got now. This is adulthood kind of thing. But of course, I've been living away from home. I've done all my crying when I was very, very young. It didn't bother me at all. The fact was, and actually it's interesting now because, and I think maybe it's also the military background thing, perhaps, my parents don't live that close to me. They live probably a 4.5-5 hour drive from me. My brother lives in Australia.
Wow.
And it doesn't mean that we're any less together. We just don't have to be living near to get each other. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's one of those things where I've always said to my mum and dad, if you want to move to Australia to be with my brother, or near my brother, whatever, it wouldn't bother me. You're only a flight away, which I know, again, sounds very privileged, but it just means that I don't find distance an issue. So therefore, being away, again, from home...
Yeah.
doesn't bother me at all. I was just shocked. Maybe that was my culture shock, realising that actually people were upset moving away, because I'd been so conditioned, if you like, to being away from home.
I think there is an element, though, isn't there, of like you do just kind of assume everyone else is like you.
Yeah,
that's your
totally,
perspective.
Totally.
I mean, my first, it's interesting because, and I don't know if you found this, because obviously, whether anyone watching this will realise, you have your own podcast as well, don't you?
I do.
Can you tell me the name of your podcast?
Yes, it's called The Responsible Marketing Podcast.
The Responsible Marketing Podcast.
It's quite new.
It's quite new,
it's only one season. I'm working on season 2 now.
No, that's fantastic. But certainly with the Responsible Marketing Podcast, you may find this as well, that not everyone is thrilled or relaxed about been recorded.
Absolutely.
Even things like hearing their own voice. And it's one thing, that's just with you saying about you didn't realise that people would get upset about being away from home. That my kind of moment, like, what? Everyone else isn't like that, was just speaking in front of people.
Okay.
It's just, I mean, because, I play in bands, I've always been very confident and comfortable, possibly without good reason, but standing up in front of others and talking, speaking on cameras, never really been an issue for me or anything like that.
Yeah.
But, and it was when I got married, and I had 2 best friends, so I had both as best men, and one of them, he was petrified.
Really?
And he was utterly petrified. He was drying up. He wasn't overly happy about doing it, but he'd done it because I was his friend.
Yeah.
And I just didn't fully appreciate what he'd gone through to do that for me.
Yeah.
Because you take certain things for granted, and it's just interesting to pick up on you with your confidence. And that comes across talking to you now. You seem a really confident person, not fazed at all by, to the contrary of like sort of potential guests that we're talking about, wondering, all right, I want to prepare. And, people just say, people that I know are confident. There's one guy who was asking, why don't you come on? He's a friend. Yeah. It's a conversation. It's a conversation between mates. My hands are sweating thinking about it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, even though you're mates.
Yeah, and that's it. And but it
Yeah.
is these little things that you take for granted, and
Yeah.
it's interesting because, as I say, with you and the background that you've had, and in fairness, that you acknowledge and you're very appreciative of.
Absolutely.
And that you recognise that.
lucky.
But again, and that sort of realisation as you go through life, just meeting more people that
Yeah.
don't share those backgrounds
Yeah, and I
or
think
skills.
even kind of being away at school, so although it's a fee-paying school, you know, because my dad was in the military, they were they had like I can't think of the word. There was like funding for me to go to school, so it wasn't that they had loads of money. They were super rich and they could afford for me to go. Although there were people at school, you know, who did have that privileged life as well. So that was interesting to me because I was almost like a middle ground there, really, because I was there for a reason, because I didn't want to move schools all the time, but also the fact that my parents weren't super rich, and there were people that I was kind of circulating with or in circles with who did have that kind of money, and that's an eye-opener itself, because you then work out people, how you can be and how you can't be, or how you want to be and how you don't want to be, especially if you're given extra privileges of that kind of. So again, going to uni was fascinating for me because I had then a massively broad spectrum of people from all sorts of backgrounds. You know, like my best friend, who's still my best friend now, she had a very, very different upbringing to me. You know, her mum was pretty much brought her and her sister up on her own. They didn't have much money, and her sister were probably the first, I think, in their family pretty much to go to uni or something like that. You know, and so for me, that was fascinating to find that somebody had that background, you know, and I consider myself kind of quite a normal person, as in nothing exciting really happened in my childhood or anything. You know, we were in the military, we had some great places that we moved to, but there was nothing spectacular, and we didn't have loads of money and we didn't have no money. You know, it was just like we were very much middle people. So yeah, that was just such a, and I absolutely love people. I probably didn't realise at the time, but I love meeting people. So that was just like me being dropped in an ocean of amazing fish, and it's like, oh my goodness, I want to see them all. You know, I want to get to know everybody.
Well, that's interesting in itself. Now, and I was coming on to that, and it's just like your ability to network. And it's been developed back then, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. I think
because I mean that was, you know, again, I was always fairly confident chatting to people. I think possibly when you are coming up against things like I'd mentioned, like with the dinner jackets and things like that, that does make you question, but it didn't like sort of shape my fundamental.
Yeah.
I think being at ease with chatting to people. But certainly it's interesting just from, you know, knowing what you do now and where you've been, all these amazing experiences that you've had that are kind of setting you up.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm definitely I'm more of a people person.
For success, really.
Yeah,
because I mean,
well,
I think it's. I mean, I don't think it's. Well, it's. I think the thing is, I mean, like a lot of business now it is the networking. Unless you've got a product that comes out of nowhere, which is absolutely amazing. But even then, people have got to get to know about it. Which I suppose is where you come in.
Absolutely, yeah. There's no point in having an amazing product just hidden away and no one knows about it. You still have to tell people about it. And you know, one of the best ways is being face to face. I still think being face to face in front of people. You know, the digital world is amazing. Don't get me wrong, and I'll never say that no one should have used that, but you still can't replace, you know, one-to-one or one to few, many, whatever that is, but somebody speaking and the passion and the enthusiasm behind that, you know, I don't think you can ever replace that, certainly not in a digital format.
No, I agree. And it's interesting as well, just thinking about what, you know, with my own business or with the punctuation show. Yeah. And I'm just thinking, as you're saying, now, when you're selling to teachers, it's really hard because particularly at the minute they've got no time.
No,
they
absolutely.
Don't look at the emails. They can't come to the phone. But it is interesting. Any time I've been able to actually speak to a teacher, they've rang up, which does happen. You're not getting a lot of inbound stuff like that, particularly at the minute. But over the years, when I've spoken to someone and then I've been able to convey that passion. Yeah. And that enthusiasm, exactly what you've just said.
Yeah, and also I think then you can use your, you know, so you'll probably do research or you'll know which pain points, if you like, that this will solve for them. So you can say that to them. That you can almost hear people say, "Oh God, that's such a relief." You know, thank goodness I've spoken to you. You know, it's that relief and oh, there is something out there. And actually, I didn't realise I had that issue, but actually, if you can relieve that, that means I can do this instead. Yeah. You know, I mean, even to the point where I was reading an article the other day about AI and marketing, which has always been a bit of a twisted thing for me, because I'm a bit like, oh, well, technically AI could do my job, but can it do my job? Probably not as well as I can do my job. And actually what AI can do for certainly for creative people, so whether it's marketing, whether it's teaching, whatever that is, it can free up creativity time. And actually, probably that's the specialism that we all have.
I think that's the interesting thing. I mean, when you're talking about AI, in theory, we could take 10 people and give them a paid ChatGPT account.
Yeah.
Not every single one of those 10 people is going to be equipped to make use of that tool. Mm-hmm. And, you know, if you've got someone that's quite capable, like, you know, like sort of someone like yourself with what you're doing, then that AI account is going to help you massively and save you lots of time, assuming that you're happy to use it.
Yes.
But someone that's maybe not quite as strong with literacy, someone that's perhaps more practical with their hands, and not as elaborate in coming up with prompts.
Yes.
They're not.
Briefs, absolutely.
They're not going to get the results that someone that is comfortable in that area. So, and I think it's a lot of people have said that. I mean, until AI becomes self-aware.
Yes, and do we want that
which is we start thinking of
Terminator.
That's it, Terminator or iRobot territory, and then we've got other problems anyway, other than someone taking our jobs. It's sort of going to need to start forming a resistance. But yeah, I think that's interesting. The tools that have been made, because then they're not there yet. I mean the sort of really well known weaknesses. Yeah. It's like when obviously we're connected on LinkedIn, and as you'll scroll down, people are using an AI, Mid-Journey, whatever it is, for their pictures. Yes. And you can spot them a mile away because they tend to form a certain style, and also the giveaways if there's writing. The letters aren't formed correctly, or hands is another big one. But then again, for descriptions and things like that might not be as obvious.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a place for AI.
Are you using it much in your work?
Am I using it much? I'm using it in bit parts. So I do find it saves my clients money, I suppose, rather than me sitting kind of chewing on the end of my pencil thinking, right, what are we going to write about this, And it is definitely a learning experience, because I've learned how to now put a decent brief in. I'm not going to say it's excellent, but I spent a long time on my own working out, well, if I put this in, what does it bring out? If I put that in, because if you put a rubbish brief in, you tend to get rubbish out. And you then still have to rework quite hard. And everything that it gives me back, I rework anyway. I wouldn't just take it as verbatim.
I think that's it. It's unless it's a very sort of short task or whatever.
Yeah, but even just getting headlines for social media posts or something like that, which can be a great content generator for somebody, for a business owner if they're short of time. Even then, sometimes you think, well, why are you giving me that for? Like, that's not relevant, so ditch that one. So I normally ask for 15 or 16 rather than just 10, because you normally get 2 or 3 that probably aren't usable. Yeah. But that's definitely a learning curve, and I think there's definitely a place for it. But like you say, there's ways of using it and ways that perhaps you don't want to use it, or and it is giving people access to that would need it. So somebody that's perhaps I don't know, fixing a car may not need ChatGPT, but they might want something else, whether it's a reform of a YouTube video from years ago on how to fix, I'm not good on cars, so I'm going to pick some rubbish thing out, but a battery, sort of battery out in a Ford, whatever it is,
I couldn't tell you whether you're right or not, so you say what you want at this point in time.
So, maybe that's a way that AI can help somebody like that, or that has those kind of like interests, or that is their part of their job. So I think there's definitely a place for it, but again, let's not run away with that. I think the human contact, and we're still human beings at the end, and the community is one of our biggest things. Yes, social interaction and community is our biggest thing.
I think that's something that I think as a country, I think en masse we're kind of missing.
It's
definitely and that's divides. I mean, obviously, like I live in a small village, well, because you're here. Yes. But it's like similar to yourself. It's for me, the village I live in still has a really strong community. Yes. And everyone knows each other. Yeah. It's really nice. You know your neighbours on each side. Yeah. And that's one thing. Like whenever, I don't know if you've how much time of late you've spent in cities working, going down to London, that kind of thing. But it just feels very different. And I love it. If ever I've gone down to London, it's like, this feels really exciting, but I don't want to stay.
No, one of my friends says I'm like a child at Christmas when I go to London now,
Yeah.
because I'm all the shiny windows and all the people.
It's
and
really
all
exciting.
the languages,
Yeah.
you know, and all that kind of stuff. You
Yeah.
know, I forget that actually, although it's beautiful where I live, you know, very similar to where you are, yeah, I'm kind of isolated from multicultural, multilingual,
Yeah.
anything exposure. You know, it's and it's again, it's quite interesting how quickly you become conditioned to that.
Yes.
You know, and I'm never intimidated when I go down, but I'm a bit like, there are a lot of people here. You know, I'm not used to this. Why can't I get to somewhere that's 20 miles away in almost 20 minutes? Because that's the roads around us, isn't it?
I think with those sort of skills, or that adaptability, that resilience to those sorts of fresh situations that you certainly built up for a very young age.
Yeah.
I think it's like riding a bike. You don't lose that ability, but if you get on a bike for the first time, you might just be a little bit wobbly.
Probably.
And I think that's quite possible. There's maybe a little bit of that involved as well.
I think so. And it's just shown me that actually not to sit at home and, because I work from home, a bit like you do, you know, most of the time. And obviously I go and see clients or whatever and go networking, but maybe I need to be out a bit more and in that kind of, because it does become almost a bit rusty, really. And again, I love meeting people, so I made a much more of an effort last year, back end of last year, to get out networking a lot more.
Yeah.
And really enjoyed it. But I also find it quite draining sometimes, so I have to be a bit careful now, because I think maybe I'm, getting a bit old in the tooth, and my social battery does seem to deplete a bit more quickly than it used to. But maybe I think maybe sometimes I'm just concentrating so much as well. That, I'm taking lots of information and trying to remember and retain that, as well as talking a lot about what I do. And, I find talking to people, I'm very much about an ideas generation type of person anyway. So that sparks ideas all the time. So I think I'm almost like working 300%, for maybe 6 hours of the day or 4 hours of the day. And I come home and think, oh my crikey, that's been a hard day. It's been tough.
It is. But so in terms of if we just scoot back to your career, you're then working for an insurance company.
Yes, briefly insurance. While I was waiting to try and get into corporate. And then I got into corporate. So I think I was in the insurance company maybe 7 or 8 months.
Right.
And then I worked for my first corporate, which was Cuprinol. And started a marketing assistant there, and they were amazing. It was
so that was your first. Did that link to your degree in any way?
Yes and no, because I did a lot of data analysis in my degree.
Yeah.
And what I was brought in to do was a lot of data analysis and marketing. So it was looking at lots of either market data or internal data on sales. So yes, it did. And then I was very much nurtured in there. So I got much more on the kind of product design and product development side as well. And then the graphics side as well. So done marketing briefs and working with PR agencies and things. So it gave me an amazing step to not only hone kind of like the data analysis skills that I'd already learnt to a point, but also the kind of more creative side of the industry that I wanted to be in.
Right. So how long were you in this, I suppose, first proper marketing role?
Yeah, I was probably there. I'm just trying to think, actually. I think I must have been there like a good 3, maybe 4 years. And then I decided to get married, so I moved.
Right.
I moved up to Yorkshire.
Wow.
So I'm from Yorkshire originally, but my husband, or my fiance at the time, he was up there. He was a teacher, actually. So he had moved up there for his job, away from Bristol where we'd met.
Yeah.
So I was trying to move myself up there. So I moved out of corporate temporarily and worked for a bit of a smaller business, to do with kind of walking boots and skis and things like that. So that was another kind
Was there a conscious decision about which career to prioritise, or was it just sort of
it was a bit of a mixed bag, really. My career was kind of like really just starting. So on a salary scale, for example, my industry was extremely well paid at that point. And so I think we both would have enjoyed 2 salaries of a good level and everything else. So I certainly wouldn't have given up my career. I wasn't that way inclined anyway. So, so I made the move up and worked. In fact, I worked in a business that was just outside Manchester. So I was travelling from Skipton to Manchester every day, which was a bit of a drag, but it was fine. And again, that was a massive experience. I did lots of eventing there and things like that. We dealt with companies in Germany and things. So that was a real eye-opener there as well. And then I knew really I wanted to get back into corporate, actually, because that's what I really loved.
Yeah.
So I got back into corporate through the paint industry, and I joined the paint industry instead. And my nana always said to me, you know, why don't you work in something glamorous like lipstick or stockings? I'm like, sorry, you know, yeah. Now I'm in paint, so I've gone from like fence paint and varnishes to walking boots, you know, outdoor stuff, to then paint. So
Wow.
so that was. And it took me a while to get back into corporate, I think, because I'd had a bit of a change, and I wasn't really sure that I wanted. I did want to be back in corporate, but wasn't really sure of my role. But anyway, once I went back in, I went in again as a marketing support role, became marketing manager, and a couple of female bosses, which was interesting. I'm not sure I'm actually bothered for a female boss ever again. Well, not sure I'm bothered for a boss apart from me now, but anyway. Yeah,
that's
that was
interesting.
interesting.
Actually, I had a couple of female bosses, and I was always
maniacs, I think.
That's really odd, because do you know what? I'm thinking off the top of my head, the female bosses that I've had that I felt got me.
Okay.
I was probably a lot more comfortable with them telling me what to do.
Okay, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And just thinking my first job when I was working in telesales.
Yeah.
There was a lady that I worked for who was, it was a mixed sales team, but the language, the humour was very, you know, sort of suggestive, dark. I'm sure if recordings were made, we might well all be in jail by now.
Well, I think many industries were like that, you know,
and that's right.
Because,
and we got a lot of complaints from the accounts departments about language and things like that.
Really?
As well. Yeah.
Oh.
Well, basically, when I first started there, we were on one floor.
Yes, okay.
And then they had this genius idea of like sort of opening up the whole floor and everyone account departments next to each other. It was just the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
But no, my female bosses, who, like I said, there are a couple I can think of. One was a direct boss, and you know, it's brilliant. We're still friends.
That's really amazing.
And she was just really good. She could be as laddish as most laddish lads.
Okay.
But she had that caring element to her as well.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, she wasn't old enough to be my mum. But you know, there were a team of a few of the lads there that, you know, would call her mam and stuff like that at work. And she'd like sort of, I do think she did clip me around the ear once. I think she did, and because it was that sort of, and then she sort of, you know, sort of again, that thing, you know, you couldn't do that now. But then she sort of just says, "I'm really sorry," and I just burst out like, "What?"
Yeah,
I shouldn't have hit you. It's stupid, but and it is, and again, I think you're right in what you say. It's just different times, but I think it is interesting. I suppose it is just people. It's just those people who you meet, and
yeah, totally. And I think, you know, there was definitely an assumption when I went back into corporate of, you know, if you're in marketing, obviously very fluffy marketing, so generally female. But my bosses, both of them, were really powerful women, like really, really strong. And it was still the times of, you know, if you were in front of an
just before you go any
account,
further, can you please clarify the term strong? Because I'm looking at you.
Yes.
You are someone who comes across to me as very strong.
Okay.
And your confidence, we've already established kind of where that's been developed. But you do seem like a strong person. I would trust you to do any job that you told me you could do.
Okay.
I would. You've got that kind of
good
credibility. But strong to me is one of those terms, particularly, and again, you know, we're looking at sort of gender assignation. Strong tends to it can mean, you know, you've got a strong character, but often when we say they've got a strong character, we mean they're a dickhead.
Okay.
So, hence the request for the clarification.
Yeah,
I think in itself
so
it's a
definitely
term.
Wasn't that? I wasn't implying that for sure.
Right.
But they were. They would not take any prisoners, as in, you know, they were. Their way was the right way.
Right.
Quite often. And, you know, I have a lot of respect for these women because they were in...
more focused and
industry.
ruthless.
Yes, ruthless. Right. I think ruthless. Yes, that's a really good word. Ruthless is a great word for that. You know, they really... and they knew their stuff, don't get me wrong, but there was very little kind of negotiation. It really was, you know, this is the way. Yeah. That's it. So I learned a lot of that. But I think also then, so my move went from kind of like marketing manager And then I went into commercial, so I went into kind of like almost sales side, account management.
Yeah.
Because I'm not very good cold selling. It's not my bag at all. I prefer relationships. I like to warm people up as opposed to kind of cold sell. So I went into the commercial side, and I think I took some of that ruthlessness with me.
Yeah.
And not arrogance, but just really assertiveness. I was very, very quite blunt. You know, I do use the excuse I'm from Yorkshire, so I do tend to be a bit blunt anyway, but I think I was like over the top maybe. And I went into a team of all males, and some of them I think were a bit intimidated by that, because I was there maybe still in my heels, little skirt and suit jacket, because we're still power suiting then, because, you know, that's what the industry was. But being really quite brutal at times, and very matter of fact, and not very emotional or emotionally intelligent maybe at that point, because I thought it was the wrong way to be.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so I thought I had to be one of the lads, but much more kind of like brutal with it. And actually it turned out I almost lost a bit of my own identity, because I thought I needed to be like this because I'm in the commercial team.
Do you think you did need to be like that though?
I think maybe I needed to start to be like that, just to give my own confidence, actually, if nothing else, because I needed to build myself up to show that I was worthy to be in the team, and I could handle my bias. Yeah. And just because I was female, either within the team, within the business, within the industry, it didn't mean that they were getting any less of the job that I could deliver, but also any less of, you know, the accuracy, the intelligence, the commercial acumen, all that kind of stuff as well. I thought I had to be quite brutal with that.
I think it is quite fascinating when you look at that sort of when people go into roles that have traditionally been associated with the opposite gender.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I can't, in some ways, like I say, as an English teacher, I mean, the team I worked in, we had an uncommonly large percentage of males. Because typically, if you walk into any English department, it would tend to be women.
Absolutely.
And it was mainly men that I joined up with. There were a couple of women, and it's interesting because the women that we worked with, one in particular, she was quite sort of ballsy, quite sort of laddish, but you know, retained a femininity. And was very caring, very mothering. You know, I mean, she was a real mother to the kids, and that was how she developed her relationships and things like that. Another one was sort of would really mollycoddle, and I think a lot of the sort of banter just went over her head a lot of the time. And then there was another one that worked in the office who just gave as good as she got. And I think again, just she wasn't the manager, and in some ways, pay grade wise, she's probably the bottom of the pile, but she ran the department. Yeah.
You find those, don't you?
And again, it's interesting. She then she left to go work in Switzerland, and then now she owns her own cafe.
Wow.
And you just know it's going to be a success, because she was managing our department on a lot less money than the people that she was managing.
Amazing.
Particularly the guy who was supposed to be managing, who again still a good friend. And would, I think he'd say, you know, so, no, I was actually fair enough, she did. But it is interesting. Then you get, I suppose, women that end up in the sort of traditionally male dominated positions, and I think in that case, the men can be a bit uncomfortable.
And I think, I did have, it was very much about 360 feedback and insights, everything then anyway, because they wanted us to be a better team together, and skill sets and all this kind of stuff, which was great. And I did get some feedback to say that, you know, one or two members of the team who were male were either intimidated by me or wanted me to be a bit softer. So automatically I said, in my head, clearly, it's just a bit like, well, what the hell? Like, don't tell me what to do. Like, that's your issue, not mine.
Yeah.
But actually what I needed to do was just relax a little bit and relax into the job, which actually I did.
Yeah.
I had a brilliant team around me. We had, and I'm still in touch with many of them. We had the best times. We had the best accounts. Business was thriving. We had just the most fun. And we had an amazing team all together. And actually that allowed me to then relax into the role and be confident with what I was doing. And I'm sure if you asked any of them now, they'd probably say I was a completely different fish, even like maybe a year later, just to say, because I had relaxed and I didn't have to put on this persona to say, actually, I'm just as good as you guys.
I think there's an element of that.
You've got the job.
Yeah.
Like, we know you're as good.
There's an element, I suppose, of just growing into and developing as a person anyway. I mean, I think sort of back then, we the sort of self-help wasn't as readily. I think it was. I do remember it being dismissed by one lady I worked with as American. Oh, I hate that Americanized bullshit.
Oh, yeah.
But now it's
enough.
you know it's. I mean it is. But I mean I think in fairness, if you look at the right lessons from within there, there's a lot to be learned,
Absolutely.
and I think which is fair enough. So
Yeah.
I mean, at what point then did you think, right, I want to do this for myself? Because I mean, you've mentioned you've got a young family.
Yes.
You've navigated the really difficult job that I think so many parents have got of managing the two careers.
Yes.
It's well, I mean, it's not easy though, is it?
We're still alive.
Yeah.
I don't know how I've managed to do it, but they're still alive and we're still alive. So yeah, yeah. Well, so I left corporate. Gosh, it'll be probably 13, I think, years ago now. 13, 14 years ago. 14 years ago, probably now. And worked for a much smaller business. In fact, I completely retrained. I still did marketing and a bit of PR, but I retrained as a preschool swim teacher. So I was teaching very, very tiny babies, like as young as 6 weeks. It was the youngest we took, 6 weeks old, to swim. And that was one of the most rewarding things I've ever done in my life.
Where did that come from? Because that's
yeah, I know, bizarre, right? So, so both my kids, I'm an avid swimmer. I love swimming anyway. So, and for me, one of the life skills is to be able to keep yourself alive in water. So, if you fall in water by accident, you need to have some skills to be able to keep yourself alive until someone can help you out. If nothing,
fair enough.
So my kids swam from when they were very young. Neither of them was 6 weeks. I think the youngest. I think my daughter started when she was probably about 3 or 4 months old, but my son went in a lot earlier. Yeah. Just because I was much more comfortable with he's younger, so I was much more comfortable with that. And actually, every time I took them, it was just, you know, again, I'm still in touch with swimming teachers that I've worked with. It was just such a rewarding job, and it was so amazing to watch these children of tiny ages like swim the width of a pool unaided, and they just instinctively knew what to do. You know, they clearly learned some skills. But if you put a baby in water at 6 weeks old, they still have that kind of in utero skill. So they understand if they're in fluid not to breathe. And then they learn, obviously, to bring their head up. And so you teach them techniques to bring their heads up and then breathe, and then it can carry on. So for me, it's been like, well, why wouldn't I do that? And also, I got to the point in my career where I changed businesses by then. And so I was managing a team for the national account side. So I was dealing with B&Q and Wix and Travis Perkins and Homebase and various others, big businesses for us. We'd had, I think, 7 rounds of redundancies, of which I'd been safe for all of those, which was, again, very lucky to have. But then the job that was kind of starting to become what I thought it wasn't the job I wanted. It was going to be back on the road. So I'd be away from my family for maybe 2 or 3 nights a week. My husband was trying to get promoted. He was also in corporate. He was trying to get promoted as well. So realistically, to have 2 children, I was a bit like, what am I doing? I'm actually not going to see my kids. Like, why have I even had children then? You know, what is the point of having them if I'm not going to see them and try and help bring them up, kind of thing? So I asked for redundancy, or voluntary redundancy, and they said no. So I said, well, I'll put myself in the pool, and they said, well, you can do, but you'll be safe, which is a bit naughty of them to say, but they're like, we're not going to get rid of you. You need to stay. So I just said, right, well, this role that you're giving me is just not tenable for me. I don't want to do the job. I don't like that kind of job. I want to be doing the job and looking after the accounts I was looking after. So I handed my notice in. So I still had 6 months notice to work. Yeah. So for me, leaving corporate at that point, I was a bit done with corporate, because actually then I found out, not that I shouldn't have known this, but you're just a number in the end. So where I thought, you know, I was almost getting on the board at one point.
Everyone puts so much store on their job, your career.
Yeah, and you spend so much time there, and you put so much energy into it, you know. And I'd had the opportunity to put myself forward to get on the board, and then my FD at the time, who was amazing, a female, was amazing. And she said, just be really careful what you're going to do here, because I've been on the board, I'm an FD. I've been an FD for a number of years now. I don't see my children. You know, I have a nanny, which is lovely, but I don't see my kids. So you need to decide which side you want to be on, really. Yeah. So that was a massive eye-opener for me. So I was on the senior management team, and then basically just decided this role isn't for me. Had a long chat with my husband, obviously, and like I say, he wanted to get promoted as well. for us to both try and do that corporate type job with 2 young children is really tough.
Yeah.
You know, especially if you want to be involved in the kids' lives
Absolutely.
on a day-to-day basis,
I can't remember what the quote was. It's like, you can have anything,
yeah,
but you can't have it all.
No, absolutely. And this is what we were faced with a little bit. So, again, very lucky for me, you know, my husband was on the rise, so he'd got promoted. We were kind of like similar salaries at that point.
Yeah.
It was a massive drop for me to leave corporate, but we could manage it. So I left corporate and then retrained as a swim teacher. And did that and did the marketing PR for them as well. And it was fabulous. I absolutely love working with them. They're still going. They're called Swim Babes, by the way, if anyone's interested. Yeah, but they're an amazing business, and they teach a huge amount of skills and life skills to these children that go through their programs. And then the only reason I left there is because we moved. So we moved up to the northeast.
Right.
So through my husband's work. And when we moved up, again, very, very privileged, very lucky that, you know, my husband turned around to me and said, if you don't want to work anymore, you don't have to. You know, we're in a situation where we didn't have any family up here, so I was the main carer for the kids, obviously. They were still quite young. They were only in primary school when we moved up, early days of primary school. So I was the main carer, so I had to be, you know, schlepping to school and making sure they were clothed and fed and all that kind of stuff. We had no family, like I say, no family around us to help with the care. So I was full-time carer for them, which is what I wanted to do, actually. And so to be presented with this, you don't have to work anymore. I thought, this is amazing, brilliant. I don't have to work anymore. But as it turns out, if you don't have to work anymore, it means, well, I think you have to keep house. You have to, you know, do those stuff that actually be like, wow, I'm not sure I actually want to do this.
Do you know what's really interesting? I think it's just with what you're saying as regards the job.
Yes.
And your expectations of it, and the fact that you're just a number, and then all of a sudden this, what might seem like a dream come true, right, I don't have to work anymore. There's some major realisations there that you that I don't think you do fully appreciate until later in life. And I do like that you've mentioned that as well, because that's kind of what I wanted to explore with this podcast.
Okay.
And that's kind of like your passions and your reasons for being. And it's that thing. I mean, we've got so many people that seem obsessed. And most people in a job. I remember chatting to my cousin a good few years ago, and he was just so excited about his retirement. So,
oh, wow.
Got 5 years till then. It's like, you know, what about your life up until that point?
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, I don't think he did in the end, because, I mean, just life changed, and you're comfortable with that salary. But it is that thing. It's like, I mean, you know, when people talk about retirement, it's like, well, I never want to stop playing in my band on a weekend.
No, exactly.
I never want to stop. If I can physically go to a school and make a group of kids laugh about punctuation and grammar, I want to do that.
That's amazing.
I want to do that. If I can, you know, meet really interesting people and chat to them, you know, on a video, because you learn. And I think you made a post today, hadn't you, about just saying how much you'd learned from just chatting to people in this kind of situation.
Absolutely.
And you do, don't you?
Yeah.
It is really amazing. Just you know, because you've got that. I suppose that bit more time than, you know, say we'd gone to the same networking event. There's certain sort of platitudes that have to take place. You've got to listen to other people, put up with the boring people and stuff like that. But, you know, you can start to get to know people and then sort of learn.
Yeah, totally.
And I think what has been really interesting is like those sort of soft skills for you. There's like a real strong focus, I don't know, almost that I'm picking up throughout this conversation from the skills that you developed right from very early on.
Yeah.
And then you're talking about the swim, the life skills, and it's just basically, I don't know, it's like, it's talking to you is almost like reading a book about how to cope with life.
Oh, really?
It's
no manual, so we do write it hard and fast. But
it's no, I think that there is that undercurrent thing. You maybe won't be aware of it, but it is just interesting that, you know, I can see that, and the skills that you're given from that. That kind of education, the sort of things the skills that they instill. Yeah, absolutely. And then, you know, kind of what you've learned through being successful in your career, and then the ultimate conclusion of like, sort of, well, what is it all about? Yeah. And
having a purpose. I think that's probably the biggest thing.
Exactly. Sense of purpose.
Yeah, and I'm gosh, I'm probably not there yet, but I think certainly, you know, going back to kind of like why I set this business, my consulting business up, is, you know, like I said, I was very lucky. I didn't have to work.
Yeah.
but actually I'm really rubbish at housekeeping and like cleaning. I hate cleaning. It's like my worst bugbear. So I said to myself, I had a few people ask me for bits of, as I met people in Barnard Castle where I live, and some other friends from back where we were living before said, can you help me? I've set up a new business, can you help me do that? Oh, I forgot to say that I also set up a network marketing business. Like I joined a network marketing thing for a little while as well, which I guess probably, although it's not really for me, that kind of business, it gave me the skills to understand how to run a business and what you need to do as well, and what I didn't like doing.
I think that's it, though. He's picking up little lessons.
Yeah, totally. And I wouldn't have had the confidence, I don't think, to actually set a business up without that. But yeah, so I was a bit like, well, I'll do this bit of business and I'll eventually charge, because I didn't charge for it forever because I was not brave enough to charge, and then I decided maybe I should be charging some. So my first client, I sent her an email, I can still remember now, which is 9 years ago, saying to her, we've done all this work together. Do you think you might be able to pay me for the next thing we do? And she's like, absolutely, like, why are you taking so long to ask, type of thing. So so I set my business up really to pay for my cleaner, which again, very lucky to have. Thank you very much. Wouldn't be without her. But that's why I set my business up, really, so I didn't have to do things I don't want to do. And then actually I found my love for marketing again. I found my love for people again. I'm like I say, I can't tell you how lucky I am.
That seems to me what more, just having spoken to you, that is what it comes across as it's about for you.
Yeah, totally.
You like people,
people,
and you're fascinated by people.
Yeah, and industries and why they do the things they do. And I'm meeting people in different industries. I've connected with a few people that I've kind of lost touch with recently in their industry, and I'm like, oh my goodness, your industry is so weird. Like, how can you even work in it? It's so difficult, But and it's not that my skill set can't be applied across all industries, in my opinion, and I'd work with any industry, obviously. But I just find some industries more fascinating than others. So I'd always go, my background in corporates manufacturing, I'll always fall back to that because I understand manufacturing, I know that processes and stuff like that. So, and I've got the commercial aspects of business, so I always find that really fascinating as well. So I'd never pigeonhole myself. So when you started the conversation about saying you're a strategic marketer, I think it's because I have the commercial side and the process side to add into the marketing theories, if you like, and tactics.
Yeah.
It makes me a much different proposition to what I would say is an average marketer.
One question I do have on your service, and this is an interesting one because I looked at your website, as I'd mentioned to you earlier on.
Yeah.
And one thing that is quite radically different, one tiny little detail that you've put on there, I'm not going to tell people exactly what the detail is, but
am I going to have to guess?
No. You give a ballpark appreciation of, if you're looking at this kind of service, you might be looking at this kind of... I'm not going to tell people. So if you want to find out, you need to head over to the website in order to find that. So there you go.
Thank you.
But I think that's the only time I've ever come across that.
Yeah, and it's a difficult thing, I think, because, marketing still traditionally was always one of the first things to be cut from a budget.
Yeah.
And still now, I think people think, well, I put a couple of posts on Facebook and that'll do. That's my marketing. Why is my marketing working? So much more to it. And like I said before, it's such a wide subject matter. There's so many aspects, and it has to go through the bloodline of any business as well. It's to do with the communication. It's to do with what your purpose is. It's to do with how you communicate that, what you wear when you present yourself, how you talk when you present yourself, how each of your employees, if you have employees, present themselves, all that kind of stuff. For me, it's important for people to understand this is not a cost to the business, it's an investment for the business, because although you can't say marketing will give you a win like that,
you do say it requires this kind of investment.
And I always say, if you can match my enthusiasm, then we're on a good start. Because I will go into your business like wildfire, and I will light up through ideas, or we'll work through processes, or whatever that is, but you need to help me match that, because I can't do it without you. Don't expect me to be kind of like come in as the knight on a white horse to solve everything.
No.
I have to have the business infrastructure behind me to be able to do that as well, and support, and buy-in. I think it's important for people to understand that there is an investment there. Yeah. It doesn't have to be that ballpark figure. There are ways, and always open to negotiation.
I only mentioned it because it's like, wow, that's a change. That is a change. And I think we're having a conversation about sales earlier on, and I think it is just that sort of managing expectations that makes a big difference. It's like, well, if I can trust you to be this honest, if I've got that sort of figure, and it's like I don't have that figure available, or I can make a decision. Right, okay, is that available? Is it not? But it's like, right, okay, but you can at least begin the process of making an informed decision.
Absolutely, and well, you'll know from your sales experience as well. You know, negotiations have to start somewhere.
Absolutely.
So that's my negotiation throw-in.
Yeah.
You know, this is where we can start from.
Yeah.
If someone wants to come to me and say, well, actually, I want to do more, brilliant, thank you very much, that'd be amazing. If someone comes and says, well, I haven't got that investment level right now, okay, so let's have a look at actually what you do need.
Yeah.
'Cause it might not be me you need yet, or it might be something else, you
Yeah.
know. But let's have a look at what you think you need. Let's uncover a few things, and then let's talk about how we can work that. So I'm very flexible. You know, I understand how business works. I understand how small and medium businesses work. They're much more pressured, I think, than corporates in some cases. You know, certainly from a cash flow point of view and things like that. So why wouldn't you talk to somebody and just understand where the pain points are and help it work for both sides? You know? It's part of a good business, I think.
No, I agree. And so what's the future look like for you going forward then?
Well, definitely do more podcasting because I love it. My big thing now is the first part of last year, I did a qualification through the CIM, Chartered Institute of Marketing, on sustainability. And I think sustainability, as again, very broad subject matter, but for me, sustainability means or brings about organisations to become more responsible for themselves, but also their people, for the planet, their infrastructure, what social impact they have, all that kind of stuff. So not only is that, for me, a good thing for a business to do, to become a better business or a better organisation in themselves, again, what they offer infrastructure-wise, whatever that might be, but also, again, why wouldn't you do it? Why it's an amazing marketing opportunity. People, consumers now, whether they're B2B or B2C, so whether they're direct to business or whether they're consumers, people want to know background about the business or organisation. They want to know what happens behind it, the people, the personality of the business.
People buy from people, and
still now
they
people
want
buy
to.
from people. People buy from word of mouth referral. It's still the biggest marketing tool you can ever use, or tactic you can put in place. Or take advantage of. So, you know, why wouldn't you then tell people the good stuff you're doing?
Yeah.
You know, and yes, there are things like greenwashing and bluewashing. We all know about that. But as long as you've got the evidence and the data behind what you're doing and what you're trying to achieve, even if you've just got a message out there saying this is what we're trying to achieve, then people understand that and therefore will look upon you favourably and probably support you in that as well. You know, people like good news stories, but there's so much rubbish news stories and badness. You know, we all know about that because the media are brilliant at communicating that. So why not have some really good news stories? And there are amazing businesses, not just in the Northeast, but I've concentrated mainly in the Northeast to start with. Just to try and educate and inform organisations that, you know, these things that you're doing now are amazing things you should be talking about and telling people. And then let's look at what other opportunities it'll bring, because all that will bring to you is better, well, longevity for your organisation, profit, sales, whatever that might be, amazing loyal employees or people that you work with, collaborate with. Also, your social impact for the community can be huge. And of course, the planet, which, whether you like it or not, the planet's in a bit of disarray, isn't it? So why wouldn't we want to keep it going a bit longer?
Absolutely, and I think that's a fantastic note to end on. Jo, it really has been a pleasure. I've no doubt whatsoever that you are going to go from success to success with this.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much.